In the 4th century, when death usually erased every trace of flesh, the body of Saint Silvan of Dubrovnik refused decay, confronting later generations with an unsettling reality that holiness sometimes leaves marks not on memory, but directly upon human remains, preserved beyond natural explanation. Long before stone cathedrals dominated the Adriatic coast, Saint Silvan lived a disciplined Christian life marked by fasting, prayer, and obscurity, serving quietly in a fragile church where persecution, illness, and early martyrdom were common expectations rather than distant possibilities. Historical records from the late Roman era describe Dubrovnik as a vulnerable frontier city, where faith survived through endurance, not spectacle. And Saint Silvan's devotion unfolded without public miracles, sermons of fame, or recognition beyond a small community bound by shared danger. When Saint Silvan died in the 4th century, no one anticipated anything extraordinary, for his burial followed ordinary rites, simple prayers, and humble placement, reflecting a life that sought obedience rather than signs, and service rather than remembrance within the early Christian world. Centuries later, as churches expanded and relics were relocated, those responsible for Saint Silvan's remains encountered something profoundly disturbing. His body showed no expected corruption, no collapse into dust, but an integrity that defied the slow, relentless authority of time. Unlike embalmed rulers or carefully preserved nobles, Saint Silvan had received no artificial treatment, no sealing resins, and no protective intervention. Yet his flesh resisted decay, as if governed by laws other than those binding ordinary human mortality. Clergy who first examined the remains recorded their reactions cautiously, avoiding exaggeration, yet acknowledging that natural explanations failed repeatedly, forcing the Church to confront a phenomenon emerging silently from a life that had never demanded attention or recognition. The incorrupt condition of Saint Silvan's body did not announce itself through spectacle, but through quiet persistence. Remaining unchanged as generations passed, wars reshaped Dubrovnik, and empires rose and fell around the church entrusted with his remains. For believers, this preservation raised unsettling questions about sanctity, sacrifice, and divine memory, suggesting that Saint Silvan's hidden faith had been acknowledged not through words, but through a physical testimony sustained far beyond the limits of human expectation. As the Church safeguarded Saint Silvan's remains within sacred walls, the mystery deepened rather than resolved, preparing the ground for a moment when divine intention would move from quiet endurance into undeniable manifestation, demanding attention from both faith and reason alike. In the moment Saint Silvan's tomb was opened, witnesses expected dust, yet encountered a body untouched by centuries, as if time itself had paused, silenced before an authority it could not challenge or explain within the sacred boundaries of Dubrovnik's church. Physicians and clergy approached the remains with measured discipline, examining skin, limbs, and structure, finding no chemical treatment, no environmental conditions, and no human intervention capable of producing such enduring preservation across more than 1,000 documented years of exposure and movement. Unlike legendary tales, this event unfolded under scrutiny, with records kept, dates verified, and testimonies compared, ensuring that Saint Silvan's incorruption stood as fact, not devotion-driven imagination within formal ecclesiastical investigation procedures of the Catholic Church itself over successive generations. Natural decay was expected, yet every inspection confirmed stability, forcing observers to acknowledge that the laws governing ordinary mortality had been suspended without violence, theatrics, or visible signs through a quiet, commanding divine decision embedded within Saint Silvan's remains themselves. Church authorities did not rush to declare miracle, choosing instead caution repeated verification, and public transparency. Allowing the evidence to speak with a weight no skepticism could easily dismiss, as decades of observation confirmed unchanged condition without interruption or manipulation. As pilgrims arrived, the body of Saint Silvan remained exposed to air, movement, and light, yet showed no collapse, hardening, or fragmentation, reinforcing the sense of divine governance over physical processes beyond human control, craft, or ritual preservation methods known. Medical opinions shifted from curiosity to confession, as specialists admitted that science could describe the condition, but not generate it, leaving Saint Silvan's state without natural precedent within documented biological history or environmental models available to scholars of the era. The Church eventually recognized the incorrupt body as a sign granted, not to astonish, but to testify that faithfulness hidden from history is never hidden from God, especially when lived with obedience, silence, and endurance under persistent trial and obscurity. No voice thundered, no vision appeared, yet the stillness of Saint Silvan's body spoke louder than spectacle, asserting that divine power sometimes reveals itself through unchanging presence rather than dramatic interruption of visible history, time, and ordinary human expectation alone. By the end of formal recognition, the miracle stood complete, not as emotion, but as evidence, carrying the narrative forward toward a spiritual echo that would outlast every explanation and prepare hearts for the lasting weight of divine presence ahead. Long after examinations ended, the presence of Saint Silvan's preserved body continued to unsettle visitors, not through fear, but through an overwhelming stillness, as if time itself behaved differently within the Church, yielding silently to a reality greater than chronology. Pilgrims did not depart speaking loudly of wonder, but quietly, carrying an interior weight difficult to articulate, sensing that they had stood before evidence of divine authority expressed not through power, but through restraint sustained across uncounted generations. The incorruption of Saint Silvan did not invite explanation, only recognition, leaving observers aware that human reason had reached its boundary, and that beyond it stood a presence governing both flesh and history, without urgency, spectacle, or visible command. Those entrusted with guarding the body spoke of an atmosphere that resisted familiarity, where routine never erased reverence, and repeated exposure never weakened awe, as if the miracle renewed itself simply by remaining unchanged within ordinary passing days. Saint Silvan's silent witness reshaped faith not by instruction, but by confrontation, pressing hearts to acknowledge that obedience lived in obscurity can resonate more powerfully than celebrated deeds, sermons, or victories recorded loudly within human memory. The preserved body became less an object of attention and more a threshold, inviting visitors into an encounter with divine permanence, where decay yields, time retreats, and mortality is reminded that it does not hold ultimate authority. Witnesses often described leaving the Church with unanswered questions, yet deeper certainty, recognizing that God's intervention does not always arrive to solve mysteries, but to establish presence that reshapes how history, suffering, and endurance are understood. Through Saint Silvan, the Church perceived a pattern repeated across centuries. Holiness marked not by visibility, but by fidelity and divine response granted not for recognition, but as a lasting seal upon a life fully surrendered. The miracle's endurance transformed silence into testimony, suggesting that what remains untouched by decay carries a message beyond words, reminding humanity that divine remembrance operates on scales far exceeding human timelines and expectations. When visitors finally turn away from Saint Silvan's resting place, many do so without applause or speech, carrying instead a reverent stillness, a spiritual shock that settles into the heart and rises unbidden as a quiet, inevitable Amen.